Brian Almon is with us. Let's bring Brian in here. Brian, good to see you, my friend. Happy Friday.
It is Friday. It's and we're getting near the crunch time in the session. They're still hoping to be out by the 22nd. I'm not sure they will, but they're going to be in a rush for every day from now on.
Yeah, I mean that's still their aim, is they want to be out by the 22nd. So we'll see if that happens. As they do that, we talked about, I don't know if we talked about this on the air, but the way they kind of like manipulate the calendar sometimes to like hold, because the only thing that they're mandated to do, if I'm correct, Brian, the only thing that they're mandated to do by law is to balance the budget. Once that's done, they don't really have to look at any other bills, right?
That's correct. Constitutionally, they're required to come in and bring out a balanced budget. The amount of money that comes in has to match up to the amount of money that goes out, and vice versa. And yeah, everything else is just stuff to do while they're here balancing the budget. And so sometimes good bills end up just sitting on the floor or sitting in a committee. And then once they adjourn sine die at the end of the session, then they're done. And if you want it next year, you got to reintroduce it and start the process all over again.
Yeah. So, can you imagine a dream world scenario where all they did was go in and deal with the budget?
No, there are things that need doing. There's actually other states that do alternating years. One year they do the budget, and then the next year they do everything else, and then they go back and forth.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Very true. Okay, very good. Well, let's get into something that we found fascinating yesterday. This is Senate Bill 1027. We saw it very early on in the session. This dealt with this whole concept of debanking. And it passed. It got amended. The bill got amended in the Senate. It passed the Senate. Ended up in the House Business Committee just yesterday, where it had its first public hearing, and Representative Josh Tanner was there to present the bill. Let's listen in.
With transparency, in the end, that's really the big item within this, is the transparency aspects. And these large corporations, these large banks, banking and merchant processors are not being transparent. This bill deals with debanking. A lot of people, even including myself, a few years back, I didn't realize debanking was even a thing. And then the more and more research I actually did, the more and more I found out wasn't just happening, it was actually shady on how it was actually happening and how these institutions were targeting Americans. For the banks, though, themselves, it makes me even more mad because they got massive bailouts with our tax money. And then they turn around and tell us that they can debank us for any reason. They don't have to tell us why. They can shut our accounts down. They can shut our auto deposits off. They can shut our debit cards off. They can do a lot of things with us without having to tell us why. And then as you start looking at the list of people that have actually been, especially organizations that have been debanked, it becomes very alarming at what they're actually doing and who they're actually going after.
Yeah.
So one of the things I want to point out is
so that's the crux of the issue here, right, Brian? I mean, is we've seen this happen across the country, and I really liked Josh Tanner's point here that look, we've bailed out these banks. If it wasn't for taxpayer money, these banks would be gone, and we'd be dealing with a whole set of different banking system, a whole different set of people or CEOs that we'd have to deal with. I mean, who knows? Some of the smaller banks would have thrived afterwards, and who are more in touch with the people and wouldn't be doing this type of thing. So I think there was a valid argument there to tie the two together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the banks have become more and more integrated into our society and into our government. Go all the way back to the New Deal, and President Roosevelt was starting to put in regulations over banks, and now they've got tons of regulations. And then, like Representative Tanner said, then we're bailing them out. So are these really private entities? That's because that's one of the arguments people make. Oh, well, a private business has the right to decide who they want to do business with. Well, that's not actually true anymore. At least in America, for the last 50 years, if you do any form of discrimination, you're going to get in trouble. But these banks are essentially doing that. They're essentially discriminating against people or businesses or organizations. I don't know if you've got the clip loaded up, but the chairman of the Constitution Party of Idaho came in and testified on this bill, saying that he and his organization, his party, his political party, was debanked. I believe it was by U.S. Bank, and they didn't say why.
Right, and that's a big part of this bill. We do have that clip, so let's let him tell the story here.
It's Tony Ulrich. I'm the state chairman for the Constitution Party of Idaho, and Last March, right before the presidential primary, U.S. Bank sent us out a letter. I received it in the evening. I laid it next to my chair to have some coffee in the morning and read it. We just received our bank statement, so I assumed it was advertising or, the things that banks usually send you out. When I woke up the next morning, I opened the envelope and I found a check for our account balance and a notice on it that just said account closure. No explanation, nothing whatsoever. I was really shocked because, like I said, we just received our bank statement. We just recently, within the last month, changed leadership within the party, got new account signers, and we'd all just received our bank cards. I mean, literally within the week previous. There was no explanation. I immediately called the helpline to find out what was going on, and I spent 2 hours that morning on the phone with their customer service representative and could get no answer. She suggested that I contact my local branch and see if they could help me better. So when my branch opened, I took some time off of work, went down to my local branch, and I spent almost 2 hours again with our branch manager, who escalated the situation several times, and we just couldn't get an answer. I finally, about 2 that afternoon, received a call from U.S. Bank, and they said they simply just decided to not do business with us anymore. Normally under most situations,
out of this. So, Brian, I mean that's atrocious. And one of the things that this bill does is not necessarily say you can't stop doing business with somebody per se. It's saying you got to give them the reason. Right? The reason why. And then if the reason happens to be, be transparent. And if the reason happens to be, for a bunch of these different reasons, that then the customer may have a cause of action, because you can't discriminate based on those things. So it's all about transparency here, right?
Right. The Bankers Association lobbyist got up and talked for a long time in that hearing yesterday.
Yeah, we have that clip. Yeah,
I was in the room there. One of the things she said is that if a bank isn't telling you why your accounts are being closed, then it's possible that it's due to some federal regulations regarding fraud. That if they suspect fraud, they're not allowed to tell you. The one thing I wondered, and I really wanted to get up and ask this, in some sort of testimony, is, well, what's to stop banks from, that want to discriminate, from just saying, oh, well, we thought there was fraud there, so we can't tell you what's going on.
Yeah. Which I mean, if you suspect fraud, why wouldn't you want to tell somebody like, hey, I think you may or may not know, but you're committing fraud, or call the authorities and start a case. I mean, that's these strange regulations. But one of the things that this lobbyist did do was try to provide some more amendments to the bill. But the way that this went about, Brian, this is what's really fascinating. I mean, look, we've seen people stand up and suggest amendments, but this went a little further than I would have ever seen before. Let's watch this clip.
There are 2 other states that have enacted this legislation or similar legislation, and that's Tennessee and Florida. One was last year, one was the year prior. The amendments we're asking you to consider would bring Idaho's bill more into alignment with what is on the books in Tennessee and Florida, where banks are already complying with those laws, which would make it more reasonable for them to comply with the law in Idaho. So first, we would ask that you remove the private right of action in the bill, which is on page 3, lines 43 and 44. We agree that the Attorney General should investigate and enforce violations of this act without opening the door for all kinds of, a lawsuit industry here in Idaho based on this. If members of the committee are not interested in removing the private right of action, we would at least ask that you limit the scope of the bill to persons in Idaho to keep opportunistic out-of-staters from taking advantage of this law. Also, we would ask that you consider a simpler, consistent complaint process so that banks can manage complaints and respond appropriately. The amendments we provided spell out a process that is closer to what is in place in Florida and Tennessee, and these changes would make the process clearer for everyone. We also did ask for a change in the timeline. 14 days was pretty quick to receive a complaint, investigate the complaint, and respond, so we asked for 30 days rather than 14. thank you again for the opportunity, and I'd stand for any questions. And I also will disclaim that I'm pretty new at my job, so if it's highly technical, I may phone a friend in the audience, if that's all right.
All right, Ms. Satterley, you indicated some amendments. Did you write some new amendments that I haven't seen yet? Because I saw a list of things the other day.
And Mr. Chairman, per your sage advice, we whittled the list down to what we thought was the most important.
Okay.
And it was only maybe 20 minutes before committee, but I did send them to the secretary to be distributed. Too late.
Okay. So we don't have them specifically.
I have some copies.
Okay, if you've got a copy for the page?
I do. I apologize.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
that's great. She's got amendments and everything, but you're talking about a member's bill here. Has she shared them with the member? Is the member okay with the amendments? Is
Yeah,
the sponsor in the Senate okay?
I haven't seen them, and I don't think she's shown them to the member, but I told her if she had anything, that she'd need to be very specific, and that's what she's doing. And I'm not trying to jump ahead, and I'm just trying to get out in front of us exactly what their concerns were. So.
Okay, Brian, I don't want to steal the thunder here. Let's just roll the clip with Josh Tanner.
You've had a chance to look at the amendments, and you can weigh in on your thoughts about that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, first off, extremely frustrated that you would allow a lobbyist to come up here and extend her time to have a hostile motion on my bill that was not presented to me. She came and said that she didn't get a chance to come present this to me, and you allowed this to continue to go on.
Mr. Chairman, could we go at ease for just a second and step out back?
Sure.
Take
Go
us
ahead,
outside.
Idaho politics, baby. Let's go step out back. Come on, Brian. What are we seeing there, boy?
Oh, that was fun. I was like I was there in the room watching that, and it was a little bit spicy. You know, I needed to have popcorn in the committee hearing room there. So basically, what's happening is that usually if some industry representative or lobbyist or some stakeholder wants to make some amendments to a bill or wants to propose amendments, they work with the bill sponsor, and they had to an extent over on the Senate side. The sponsor was Senator Kelly Anthon, the pro tem. And he took up one of the suggestions and made a minor change to the bill, and it passed the Senate overwhelmingly, bipartisan. Democrats voted for it too. And then it comes over to here on the House side, and you get the Bankers Association lobbyist getting up and saying, well, we want first of all, she had the chutzpah to say that banks don't debank anybody for ideological or religious reasons. She said, oh, that just doesn't happen. And then she goes on to say, well, that there's problems with this bill and we need to fix it. So here's some amendments. And she's, having the page hand them out to the committee members. Meanwhile, the bill sponsor is sitting back there, and they've never actually had a one-on-one meeting about this. When Representative Crane asked if she had talked to the sponsor, you can't hear it in the video, but Tanner says no. You could hear him in the room. So yeah, he was frustrated by that. And I've seen some other frustration throughout this session about lobbyists having a bit too much power, lobbyists having the ability to actually present bills in committee instead of just testifying on them.
Yeah,
so
but Brian,
they're getting a little too cozy in this process.
Yeah, and Brian and the chair of the committee, like totally entertaining the idea. Like, oh yeah, hand out the amendments. We'll talk amongst ourselves and figure out what to do. And it was like, you're totally hijacking the bill here.
Mm-hmm. Well, they did come back. Representative Tanner called it a hostile amendment. And, that's actually a term that they use in here for an amendment that goes against the will of the bill sponsor. Right. Sometimes there's amendments that the sponsor says, okay, yeah, I see that. I agree. Let's change the bill. Let's change the wording a bit. That's a friendly amendment. But then you have a hostile amendment where they're trying to change the whole purpose of the bill. And that actually happened yesterday in the House floor. They went into their general orders to amend a bill. And it was Representative Dory Healy's bill to say that if you have a campaign sign, you have to have your party on there, Republican, Democrat, or an elephant, or a donkey, or whatever. Representative Monica Church, Democrat from Boise, presented some amendments to it that would say not only do you not have to put that on there, but you only have the option of doing it. You may put your party on there, which completely defeats the purpose of the bill,
Yeah.
and that is a hostile amendment. It's contrary to the purpose of the bill sponsor. So, yeah. So Representative Tanner, he came back. Are you going to play the clip?
No. He came back and,
he came back and he very politely said, I do not want to see any amendments to this. Please send it to the floor, and they did.
And that's what the committee did. Yeah, they ended up sending it to the floor with only a couple of people dissenting. So, yeah, very good, very good. All right, and there was also another comment from, we're not going to play the clip, but Cornell Razor, he had that happen to him as well. So he had a sitting legislator who got debanked. He had an interesting comment about how he didn't even get his money back. He had to wait a long time to get his money, and then he said he used some strange methods to get his money back. And he said it'll leave it up to our imagination. We'll play the clip later, perhaps.
I just want to imagine Representative Racer, robbing a bank or something.
Exactly.
Not do, but, if we have time for one more thing on this issue. I wrote about this yesterday over at Gem State Chronicle, this bill and this whole issue. And apparently the federal government is addressing this as well. The Senate just introduced a bill that takes away the ability of banks to use something called reputational risk as a factor in determining whether or not to close someone's account. And that's really kind of been their excuse for this. They say, well, guns are bad and they have a bad reputation, so we don't want to do business with anybody who's selling guns or gun accessories because that brings us reputational risk. That harms us by association, or whether it's conservative organizations or the Constitution Party of Idaho. That's kind of been their excuse. So they're addressing it at the federal level too, and we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah. All right, Brian, we're going to let you go. We got Senator Nichols on deck. Where can people follow you? And we got an article coming out today from you as well.
Yeah. GemStateChronicle.com. I talked about the debanking issue yesterday. Today I'm looking at digital IDs and licenses. Gem State Brian on Twitter, still trying to live tweet everything. And also, watch for Citizens Alliance on X with the exclusive article, just looking at how our legislators are, their job is to protect our life and liberty. And sometimes that means, you've got to protect people from other people. You got to protect people from dangerous ideologies, exactly what you've been talking about this week about what's going on in our schools. It's time to pay more attention to that.
Very good. All right, Brian, have a great weekend, brother.
Thanks, man.
All right.